All right. Welcome back, everybody. I am so excited for this next segment, all about the importance of the cloud in retail. And to talk about this for a little fireside chat, I have two great colleagues of mine, Meghan Hodge, who's on the partnerships team with me here at InfoTrust, and Tyler Blatt, who's in the Cincinnati office with me, one of our lead analytics engineers. You cannot believe what we're about to be talking about. I'm so excited. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Dom. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're here in the 7th inning stretch, and during this session, Tyler and I will discuss the importance of cloud and retail. We've been tag teaming during meetings with partners over many months as retailers begin laying out the groundwork or actively building out their data flows to support future-proofing their sites. So our retailers understand that developing a clear strategy that maintains and grows their access to first-party data is really critical to avoid spending more for flat performance. And personalization is the key to optimizing first-party data and driving better customer experiences that help offset losses in traffic and audience.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump in here and talk a little bit about this. But one thing I want to call out is we love questions. We may have time for them at the end. If not, I'll get back to you. But please feel free. I want to see your questions in the chat and let us know what you're thinking or if you have anything that's unclear. But jumping right in on this, I mean, listening to Neil talk this morning, it became very clear about the idea for testing, the need to be quick to test with the current state of data. And that certainly rings true in retail in the uncertainty of the current times. And I believe we are in uncertain times. Not only is it COVID time, you have production delays, shipping delays, the customer needs are changing, but it's also the privacy landscape is changing. And for those of you that were here for Lucas's talk, it is affecting the way we are able to collect data about customers from a personal perspective, even in ways from an anonymous perspective. And first-party data is becoming more important than ever to kind of circumvent any coming changes and to make sure that you're set up for that kind of strategy. And on top of that, when your contract between you and the customer is sort of being rewritten, you have to ask yourself, are we listening to them and evaluate what you're collecting in that first-party data strategy? And then sites are changing. So not only is the current status quo of how we're looking at data right now a little bit different, each month to month, the data may be different because the world is constantly changing. That's making our historical data a little bit more inaccurate. So there's also questions that we have a great first-party data strategy, but how quickly will it go stale, and how quickly is it accessible for us to be able to interact with it? So my hopes today are just a level set on what we hope to do today. I'm going to try to explain how we can use the cloud to maybe alleviate some of those problems and best propose ourselves for a good personalization and first-party data strategy in the future.
Absolutely. And Tyler is sort of our Swiss Army knife of everything data. So he can walk you through basically any kind of architecture in terms of solving any data issues. So thank you for that, Tyler. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And just to go back to this barrier to personalization. So one of the top barriers that is recognized through a McKinsey survey that was recently polled, 67% cited that collecting and integrating their data as well as synthesizing was really their greatest personalization challenge. And other barriers might include, not having the right internal expertise from a data analytics perspective. Of course, alignment. We've heard that theme come up repeatedly during different sessions. Alignment of teams was also critical. And then finally, just activation. And through our conversations, Tyler and I, with organizations, we've been, we've heard that different retailers have made significant inroads, but still needed some help with their data flows and stitching it all together, while others were, just sort of kicking off their strategy.
Yeah, to recap off or talk a little bit off the back of how important data management is, the first one on this slide, but to hone in on data management specifically here. If personalization is the destination, then data management is definitely the road to get there. And where I'm often seeing companies fail is it's not just the data that you have, but it's also the systems you have to organize that data. Do you have a semantical layer? How is your data being organized? Do you have it readily available for analysis? You can collect all the quality data in the world, but if the people who need to interact with it are not able to interact with it, then it's effectively not useful. And then ultimately, the way I think we should be judging our data is, does it lead to more insights? Is it supporting a cyclical nature in which we understand our customer deeper, which allows us to ask a question or collect more data to understand them deeper? It should be cyclical, in which it serves us to be able to both expand on the quality and quantity of our first party data sets and dive into them. So data management is very much central to the philosophy of how I think we should be measuring our first party data sets, and especially as they relate to personalization. So that's certainly the first section of the slide that we're on. Second section being the decisioning, which is really close to that semantical layer that I'm talking about, or even the organization or the philosophies we have against how we're structuring our data. How are we organizing our data? What are the plans for it? What do we need to collect that's not being collected? The design section here, if we think about design, it's how are we designing our team, how are we designing our projects, how are we designing our capabilities and talents that we need to push through, because you want testing to be a cultural thing, not to be something that we're just trying out right now. And if you take anything away from Neil's keynote, and Michael's keynote, which was a very, very powerful session, I think that's one of the biggest pieces. Testing culture doesn't just happen at the macro level and the micro level. So even down to looking at within specific personalization goals, a culture of testing can be achieved by how you acquire talent and how you build your team. Then lastly is the distribution, or the execution of these concepts. So you want to, the technology enablement's a big one. This isn't necessarily trivial things. There's a lot of data that needs to be collected. There are a lot of third and first party data sets being combined. There are a lot of tools out there that allow you to enable how you would use a personalization engine, enable how you could link it to something like email ad campaigns and other such things. So leaning on the technology that's available that allows you to get there oftentimes will help people do number 8, which is test and learn. Do this faster. You want this culture where you're continually testing. You're leaning in, and your test should. I think you evaluate a good test is if it came to a conclusion, that conclusion should inform your next test. That shouldn't be the end of the road. You should say, I now understand that this is a profitable thing for my customers, or this is a thing that's causing them to think the behavior of the site is not ideal. And then there should be a test on how to solve that problem, or to understand that deeper, to collect that information. And that goes back to the cyclical theme with testing.
And it's iterative, right? So, it's that 5% that Neil was talking about, just getting a little bit better with each week and each month that goes by. And just kind of going back to that test and learn environment really needs to be supported from the top down. So leadership has to be, heavily invested in that testing environment, testing and learning environment.
Completely agree.
Okay, I'm going to the next slide.
All right, this is one for me. So I'm going to go engineering on you guys for a little bit, but trust me, we're bringing it back home. So it's a little difficult sometimes for me as a /engineer/business person to walk this line. So I'll do my best, but please, if something's not clear, let me know in the chat, and we'll make it clear. So how does cloud fit into all of this? I will do my best to keep the technical parts brief. BigQuery first-party data strategy. So you need a place to store this. So BigQuery is a perfect home for a first-party data strategy, and in my opinion, the best data warehousing tool on the market. I want to talk about a couple of the features on why you would want to build around BigQuery and some of the headaches that it leaves. Firstly, it's a fully managed tool. So when you think about, what is the cloud replacing? These big server racks that used to be the whole reason we call them the cloud is we had these physical on-premise server racks. And one of the big pains with server racks or running your own databases is you have to have an IT team to run against them. BigQuery is managed for you. You don't have to have a team that runs against it. It's a platform that you can use as this service. Because of that, I'm actually going to jump to my second cost-efficient point. Space is actually pre-allocated. Now, there's other data warehouses on the market where you say, I need 2 terabytes of data, and then when I'm at 1.9 terabytes of data, I'll come and talk to you and provision more, and you have to continually manage that, and IT has to think about space and how that works. It's all pre-allocated for you in BigQuery. So you never have to ask it for space. You just send it data and it'll store it for you. So a lot less heavy on what you'll need to do to manage that. Obviously, a plan and good structured tables always goes a long way. So some IT department working, but it lowers the amount of time that you need to get to a place where you can kind of lay down all of your first party data. This next one is a big one. Data is cheaper over time. So essentially, without going too far into the technical details, every time you write a query, you're getting a table back. So you say, out of this table, I want this table, this little table with some more logic. And each time you do that, what Google will do for you within the BigQuery tool is cache that table off and store those results. And as long as that table's not altered, which there's ways to not do that, and still add more data, it will get cheaper over time, and you actually don't pay for those queries anymore. The storage, the longer the table remains unchanged, becomes cheaper over time and is cheaper to store. So by investing in BigQuery, you'll actually lower your long-term cloud costs on storage rather than having them grow as your data gets larger. And I think that's one of the coolest things about the platform. The last thing I'll say about BigQuery is it's also built for, you're never going to guess this, big queries. So that it can handle very, very large queries and at scale. So when you look at these big analysis pipelines that need to run, you don't have to, the same way you don't have to provision space, you don't have to provision processors. You don't have to provision the ability to run these large queries. It handles that for you. So you can just ask it questions and it will just give you answers. And that simplicity makes it a perfect landing place and a cost-effective landing place to start your first-party data strategy. I will be really light on this next section because while it is very important, the message that I want you to walk away with is that there is a tool for that in Google Cloud. So the one that I'll talk about is for ingestion and processing is GCP's Dataflow, which is a managed data processing pipeline. And it's essentially the way that you can pick up and move data around, apply rules to it, drop it where you need to go, clean it, rearrange it if you need to. But it is one of 20 plus tools that can do similar functionalities in Google Cloud that are all fit right for your team. And you could organize those 20 plus tools in thousands of ways. There is a solution that makes sense for every team. Google Cloud has very much focused on data science, functionality and data processing and storage functionality. That's one of the places I think Google Cloud plays the best. And you can find the right tool for you in ingestion and processing. And the last thing, because we're here to talk about personalization today, is Google's recommendation engine, or Google Recos. It's gone by a few names and a few iterations, but these are just a couple steps you could get to implementing this. The Google Retail API is essentially an API that allows you to manage your catalogs, current storage, and stores. So implementing that API will allow you to use the Recos engine, as well as linking your Google Analytics product catalogs and behavioral tag from site to the recommendation engine, and that will actually allow you to run multiple types of models. So it's not just one type of model. And when we talked about test fast and learn fast, you can deploy up to 4 models at a time, I think, from the start, and then it grows from there I think it actually might be 10. But you can start testing multiple models from the very beginning and start finding out how Google Recos could potentially change how you're thinking about recommendation engines today. We can go next slide.
All right, so Tyler and I are going to walk you through a challenge that was presented by one of our clients that we've worked on. We can go to that next slide. Okay, so the client came to us with a goal. So they really were looking to optimize their on-site personalization, and they needed some data governance and standardization, really to ensure compliance. And they were thinking about evaluating and auditing the current data warehouse, getting that ready for machine learning, ultimately enhancing the customer experience and driving more conversions. Really, the challenges that they came across was that their current tool didn't provide a clear and actionable data, really surfacing that in their current A/B testing. And then they lacked the capability to render side-by-side comparisons to learn from that and to visualize that. They also did not have a mechanism for user-based product recommendations based on that interaction.
Yeah, the not go too deeply because we've talked about some of these concepts already. But one of the first things I said, and it certainly ran true in this case, and it runs true in a lot of cases, data governance and standardization. We have this goal of we know our profitability will go up, our customer engagement will go up, our messaging will be better if we do this personalization. And there's this narrative to get there. But like I said, the road to that it comes from your data management, your data strategy. So the data governance and standardization piece often is a pain that people skip over and want to jump straight to the value. And no means am I saying without the correct data, you can't start testing. I would say test now and build as you go on. But to see the deep value in those tests, you want to make sure that you have quality data and you understand and have organized that. So that's one big thing I want to call out as a goal, and both one of the challenges that stands in people's ways. One other thing I always like to say, just because I feel like these terms get thrown a lot and people don't clarify this, so less important for personalization, but the difference between a data lake and a data warehouse, because I think it gets lost on people. If you think of what a lake is, it's an unstructured body of water. It's kind of just dump more water in it. What water is in there, it doesn't matter, just dump it in. Nobody cares the structure of the organization of it. So it's just a place for us to throw our raw data. So drop our file from this platform, drop the API from this platform, set up this integration, just throw it all in there. This is where it all lands. And then the evolution of that to a warehouse, if you think about a warehouse, you don't want to drive through a warehouse where all the boxes are fallen and it's unorganized. What it is it's a bunch of cleanly organized purposeful tasks and storage of units, right? So that when we turn our data lake into data warehouses, they might have different functionalities. And the warehouse built for personalization might be different than the one that we interact with customers with, because personalization may have less accurate data. We might be willing to accept a 5% discrepancy to enrich that data quite a bit. But if we're going to show this data to customers, we don't want to be 5% incorrect with the response to customers. So when you think about how you're turning your data lake into a data warehouse, always think about the purpose of what this warehouse is serving and what we want it to do, such as, like kind of a MarTech playground versus a highly transactional customer-facing API.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, let's go ahead and march on to the solution, and we can go to the next slide, and you can explain the solution that you prescribed here.
Yeah, so just diving in. One, I want to know the first-party data set whenever I first start talking to a customer, and I want to ask some philosophical questions of how much do you think you know about your customers? Is there information you would like to know? Where are we at with the current data state? Just understanding that. So, and then I also want to know, are you currently running any A/B tests, and what are the results of those? Are we seeing inconclusive? Are we running things for long? Are we running multivariate tests that aren't showing good potential outcomes? So we need to back up, or should we be running multivariate tests to maybe find out some more specific use case? So I'd like to audit and understand where we are first. And then because how I explained with GCP earlier and Recos, but other tools within GCP that allow you to do recommendations, we can run multiple models at once. It is not something that we need to just go test one thing. Now, I will say with the caveat, I wouldn't want to do that on the same page. I don't want multi changes potentially affecting each other. If we're going to follow the scientific process, it should be one change. But that doesn't mean we can't run some sort of test against our campaigns while we're also running tests against certain landing pages, or we're testing different functionalities. So I would say test often, quick, and find what's working, and then that should inform where we're looking to improve things about our website. And then lastly, long-term strategic planning. So we've looked at the first-party data set. We've started running tests. We got where we wanted to be. We have the data. We're testing. Where do we want to grow with this? We should be looking at those tests quite straightforward at what they're telling us about our customers, and we should be able to listen. What are our customers telling us through this test, and then what's the long-term personalization goals based off of that information feedback? Let's give the customers what they're asking and ear to the ground, and that can come in. To bring up privacy, that can come in a couple different ways. I mean, personalization can be done at an aggregate cohort-based level that is completely anonymous, and we're just generally looking at what customers are doing, improving the site. That also can come from a personalization engine that's deeply related to customer journeys, and it's informing what content they're seeing over time. This can come in multiple complex environments, but what you should do is find out what's working for your customers and your company and develop a long-term roadmap on how you want to get there based off of the two philosophies listed above.
Okay. And I always like to show this visual. I think it really just aligns in terms of what we were talking about and the concepts behind it. And really, this is just the ideal state. It's a fully optimized data flow with a single customer view within analytics. And then those bi-directional for marketing performance metrics for optimization, as well as those user data sets to help map the online and offline activities.
Yeah, a quick comment on this. Even looking at this single customer view, it's almost the privacy narrative is almost given like a new definition for this to me. Mm-hmm. And this is something we've been using. This visual has been something we've been using since the privacy world really changed rapidly. I mean, this is something that the InfoTrust has been preaching for a long time. But when you look at this, you kind of have anonymous signals on the left and then tied to users on the right. The image. So it's interesting to see the philosophical breakdown of how we can think about this data differently. And regardless, we should be collecting behavioral information from an anonymous perspective. But then when the user consents and agrees to it, then we can think about those very specific user data sets and how they apply to those top level metrics and how we could potentially have them influence cohorts or understand our customer journey a little bit more specifically.
Yeah. We can go to the next slide. So nobody should be scared. We're going to show you some roadmaps that we've developed. And one roadmap, I'll go ahead to the next one, and you can kind of do a high level over this granular roadmap for the personalization that was going to be that first sort of step into the project.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of this should be obvious after what we've been saying, but this is more or less, a system. Say I want to be there. How do I get there? And you can certainly add steps to this along the way, but this is just a way that we propose taking a stab at this type of culture and what you could do to implement it now and get to some long-term goals. So this is a fairly short-term goal. Of just looking at where your current A/B testing and other platforms are, reviewing your data conclusions is just what is my data telling me now, or do I even have the ability to understand what my data is telling me now? Setting up, if you want to start with recos, there's some basic steps at the beginning of this for setting up what you'll need to do to be able to use recos. We suggest optimize, but the implementation of an A/B testing tool is obviously great if you're thinking about doing recommendation engines or other personalization-like tools. And if you're going to do recos, setting up the data feeds and retail tags. If you're on the Google stack, we would suggest linking everything that you can. And even if you're not on the Google stack, BigQuery is a great place for you to land. It might not have the linkages that GA, SA360, and Google Ads do to some of the A/B testing and recos platforms within the Google network, but that doesn't mean BigQuery is not a great place to start storing your first-party data sets. And then ensure normalized data collection in GA or whatever your analytics platform is. Make sure that you have good standard data, and especially if you're multi-brand, because you want to run this across lots of places. When you're thinking about scale, you want to nail this down with some brand and have a proof of concept. But when you want to scale it out, you want to make sure that there's some kind of standardization and governance layer there. And then I can't say this enough. The final bullet on the first bullet on the final stage: launch, revise, test. Go back and revisit, refine. Use the logic to create more logic. This is not a process that is just one and done. Okay, we did it, we tested, take all our money and move on. It is cyclical in nature and should be treated as such. So more models, revise models, and always test and report. Reporting is so necessary.
Okay, and then the larger model.
Yep. So this is a little bit more complicated. I don't know that I'll go line by line, but at least go section by section. Evaluate feasibility for multivariate tests, MVTs. I'll speak a little bit about the complexity. So running a multivariate test means you have a lot of data to be collected. So they specifically take longer and sometimes can be inconclusive if you didn't do a good enough job at choosing the differences. So you should definitely think before you just start throwing multivariance tests, because if we're thinking test fast and learn, you're not maybe going to get insights if you start off with that. But once you think you're ready and you have a pretty good idea that this is definitely in fact affecting our customers and this is definitely affecting our customers, then it's time to review that, evaluate, and start to implement that. reviewing the data state and establishing the need model. So these are models we absolutely need. So if we understand CLV and we understand and we have highly personalized journeys, we might change what we're showing customers based off of their customer lifetime journey and what the products that they're seeing on the page. So that is a need model. That's something that's going to really heighten the ability for us to make money or give them the products that they really want. GCP readiness assessment and privacy risk assessments, that's just making sure that we know, are we using cloud in the way that we should be? Like, have we talked to a partner that maybe knows cloud better than us, or hired an engineer that knows cloud very well to say, like, hey, we're using this in a clever way? Because a lot of people will step into these worlds and the tools are easy to start, but the for cost savings, scalability, and efficiency, oftentimes it's good to assess where you're at. And that's the same from governance and privacy. So just understanding how much of this is relying on third-party cookies. Will we be able to use identification tools in the future to reach out to these customers? How much email data do we have linked to our anonymous analytics data so that we could build segments out of there and then use Google Customer Match to reach out in audiences? So it's asking those questions to understand how ready you are for privacy.
Okay, I think we're getting close to time here. So
Yep.
I guess if we want to kind of just wrap it up and then see if we have a time for any questions.
Yep. Yeah, if we can jump to the last slide here, I've got a little quick recap, and then we can ask for questions, and if there's no questions, we can talk about COVID purchases. So obviously, I just talked about multivariance test. Custom machine learning models are important, and you should understand which models best fit your use case. I want to recap a little bit on themes that I think you should take away. So number one being a culture of testing. You should make sure that we're not just stepping into this as something that we're going to try, but we're going to commit to this culture of testing and make sure that we continue to push that, because that's where you see the deep value. A first-party data set that informs us of users' actions. So you'll build many first-party data sets, and they'll have many purposes, some transactional and some analytical, but make sure that your first-party data set is informing you of how users are behaving. You need a strategy on what you're collecting and how you're organizing it. So that's a piece that a lot of people miss is, what should we be taking in? How should we be organizing it? Is it discoverable? Does it support for analysis amongst the team? Cyclical testing is the goal. That's a big point, is we want to make sure that the testing feeds back information for what more we could be collecting, what more we could be diving in for analysis, and what other tests could be being run. And a big one is privacy is not at odds with this type of measurement. We can think of different ways we can collect this data. It can be done in an anonymous, aggregate, site-wide behavioral type way, and it can be done in a very specific personal customer journey type way. And you need to be asking yourself, how am I doing in both of those areas, and what could I be doing to improve in each of those areas, and making sure that you're kind of covering your bases so that you have the first party data set that allows you to do both of those things. With that said, I think that's my recap, and I'd like to ask if there's any questions in the chat. But also, I guess I can throw to you, Megan. What is your weirdest COVID purchase while we're waiting on that?
Oh, my weirdest COVID purchase. Gosh, how the life has changed. I would have to say probably outside fire pit that I didn't imagine that we would have. So built out this whole area so that we could all be outside. I think home design is going to change tremendously based on going through the COVID times, for sure.
For the listeners, I promise she did not plan on saying that, even though this is a fireside chat. So that just worked out that way. I would say I've had a couple weird COVID purchases. I got some musical equipment and a punching bag. But the one that I'll say is the most interesting, because we're still in COVID times, is I've recently gotten a puppy. So that is, I don't know if it's weird, but it's definitely a life-changing purchase during the COVID times.
That most certainly is, Tyler. And you know what? We do have one quick question if you want to answer this quickly before we get going on to the next section.
Let's do it.
How long does it take on average to roll out the solution that you proposed?
It depends on if we're talking about like holistically just setting up Google Recos. If you have an A/B testing platform, what kind of signals you have currently informing and how close you are in that journey. So to look at it holistically, if someone hasn't started, I'd say it's quite the journey and you should be looking at least a quarter. But if you're somebody who's looking to tackle Google Recos, it could be done within a month's time, just setting up just that platform and just doing what it needs to do. A/B testing implementation could be as low as a month. So it really depends on each use case, but each customer is a little different. And to think about the journey holistically, it can be quite the effort. But I would say as low as a month for individual pieces.
All right. Well, really appreciate that. Thank you both so much for speaking on this. Tyler, I love it when I hear you talk about this stuff all the time. So really appreciate that.